Morning my husband left for Vancouver, I stood at the departure gate at Pearson and cried so hard that a stranger offered me a tissue. What that stranger didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had already met with a divorce lawyer twice that week. I kept the tissue anyway. It felt like a prop I'd earned. His name was Nathan. We've been married 6 years, together for 9. He was a project manager for a large construction firm headquartered in Mississauga, and when they offered him an 18-month contract overseeing a major infrastructure development on the West Coast, he came home and told me over dinner like it was already decided. Not a conversation. An announcement. It's a huge opportunity, he said, cutting his chicken. The salary bump alone, it's going to set us up, Lee. Lee, that's me. 31 years old, registered nurse at Toronto General, someone who had spent the last 3 years quietly building a life she thought was shared. I asked him the obvious question, could I come with him? At least for the first few months until we figured things out? He had an answer ready. The company was covering a furnished studio apartment, barely room for one person. My job here, my parents, the lease on our condo. It wasn't practical. It was only 18 months. We'd visit. We'd call every day. It would go fast. I nodded. I said okay. And somewhere under that okay, something small and cold settled into my chest and didn't leave. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I think the honest version is more useful than the clean version. I didn't suspect anything the day he left. I cried at Pearson because I was actually sad. I loved my husband. I had loved him for almost a decade. I was sad because something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name yet, and grief sometimes arrives before the information does. He flew out on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was back on a 12-hour shift, coming home to an apartment that smelled like his shampoo and nothing else. I told myself this was normal. I told myself couples did long distance all the time. My colleague Amanda had done 2 years with her partner while he finished his residency in Montreal, and they were fine. People did hard things and came out fine. I called him every night for the first 2 weeks. He always picked up, but there was something slightly off in the rhythm of those calls, a half-second delay that wasn't about the time zone difference, a flatness when I talked about my day, the way he'd start wrapping up the conversation right around the time I was warming up to it. I mentioned it to my mother during Sunday dinner in Scarborough. She said I was overthinking. My husband was busy, he was under pressure, he was in a new city. I nodded and helped myself to more rice and tried to believe her. The thing that actually started it, the thing that cracked everything open, was a credit card statement. We had a joint credit card we'd had since year 2 of our relationship. We used it for groceries, shared expenses, the occasional dinner out. I paid the statement online every month without looking at it too carefully, because there was never anything unusual. Except in October, there was. I was at the kitchen table going through our finances, something I did every month because I was the one who tracked our budget, and I saw a charge I didn't recognize. A restaurant in Kitsilano, Vancouver. $240 on a Wednesday night. I sat with it for a moment. Maybe a work dinner. That happens sometimes. But then I scrolled back and saw another one. A hotel in Whistler. A weekend in September. The weekend he'd told me he was doing a site visit near Squamish, and the connection was bad, so we barely spoken. I put my laptop down. I made tea. I didn't drink. I sat on our couch in our apartment in Liberty Village, and I looked at the wall for a long time. I didn't call him that night. I needed to think before I said anything, because I knew, from watching other people go through this, from the conversations I'd had with friends who'd been here before me, that the moment you reveal what you know, everything shifts. You lose the ability to gather more information. You lose the advantage of knowing that you know. I kept that advantage for 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, I called my friend Marta, who had gone through a divorce 2 years earlier and had come out the other side cleaner and sharper than I'd ever seen her. She didn't tell me what to do. She just listened, and then she gave me the name of her family lawyer, a woman named, well, I'll call her my lawyer because she deserves her privacy, who had an office in Yorkville and an extremely calm manner that I needed desperately. My first meeting with my lawyer was on a Wednesday afternoon on my day off. I wore my good coat and pretended I was going to a coffee meeting because I couldn't bring myself to say the word divorce out loud to anyone who wasn't a legal professional yet. She walked me through everything methodically. In Ontario, family law is clear about matrimonial property. When you separate, the increase in value of most assets acquired during the marriage gets equalized. Our joint savings account held $430,000, money we'd built together over 6 years. Though I'd contributed roughly 65% of it because I'd come into the marriage with more savings and had consistently earned more than my husband in the past 3 years as my seniority at the hospital increased. My lawyer told me to start gathering documentation, bank statements, pay stubs, records of my contributions, any evidence of financial misconduct, meaning if my husband had been using marital funds for his affair, that mattered. I went home and I gathered. The hotel in Whistler had cost $380.80. There was a florist charge I'd initially dismissed as a client gift, a spa booking at a resort, a jewelry store in Guest Town, $620. I printed everything. I made a folder. I labeled it taxes, because even in an empty apartment, old habits hold. I also, and this is the part I've gone back and forth about whether to share, but I think it's important, I called my bank separately. My husband and I had a joint account, but I had also maintained my own personal checking account throughout our marriage, the one I'd had since my 20s. I'd never hidden it. He just hadn't paid much attention to it. Every month, I'd been putting a portion of my paycheck into it. Not as a secret, just as something my own financial advisor had always recommended. An emergency fund. Money in your own name. That account had about $47,000 in it. Not life-changing, but mine. My lawyer advised me on next steps. Given the documentation I'd gathered, I had a strong basis to argue that a portion of the joint savings represented my own premarital assets and disproportionate contributions. We weren't going to take anything illegally. We were going to file properly, document thoroughly, and let Ontario family law do what it was designed to do. I had one more appointment with her before I did anything visible. The night before I was due to sign the initial paperwork, I called my husband. We talked for 40 minutes. He told me about a difficult subcontractor situation at the site. He asked if I'd seen the new season of a show we used to watch together. He said he missed me. He sounded like himself, and I sat there on the couch holding the phone against my ear and thought about the version of this conversation I might have had a year ago, how safe it used to feel to just talk to him. And I let myself feel that for a minute. Then I said goodnight, and I slept better than I had in weeks. I signed the paperwork the next morning. My lawyer filed the petition for divorce 2 days later. Irreconcilable differences. Adultery as a supporting ground with documentation attached. I didn't call Nathan to tell him. He found out from the process server. He called me within 20 minutes, and the call was not what I expected. I'd braced for anger, for denial, for the version of him that I'd built up in my imagination as the worst possible version. Instead, he sounded stunned, almost quiet. He said my name twice. I told him I wasn't angry. I told him I was just done. I told him that the marriage had been over for longer than either of us had acknowledged, and that I was choosing to be honest about it now instead of waiting for it to rot from the inside out. He asked if there was someone else. There wasn't. There still isn't. Not in the way he meant it. He said he wanted to talk. I said we could talk through our lawyers. I moved out of the Liberty Village apartment at the end of that month into a 2-bedroom in East York that I'd found on a Tuesday and signed on a Thursday. My mother helped me move boxes. She didn't ask too many questions until we were done, and then she made tea in my new kitchen and looked at me across the table and said, "You seem okay." "I am okay," I said, and I meant it, which surprised me a little. The financial settlement was finalized 4 months later. My documentation held up. My contributions to the joint account were established clearly. Nathan's use of joint funds for personal expenditures during the marriage, the Whistler Hotel, the Gastown jewelry, the dinners, was factored in as marital waste under Ontario law. My lawyer was calm and thorough and exactly who I needed in the room. I walked out of that process with $298,000, my equalized share of the matrimonial property, calculated fairly and legally with every number accounted for. He got the rest. I want to be clear about something, because I've seen the way people tell these stories, and I don't want to tell it that way. I didn't outsmart my husband because I'm cleverer than him. I got through this because I had information, I had a good lawyer, and I had spent years doing something my mother had told me to do before I was even married. Keep your own account. Know where your money is. Don't make yourself financially invisible in your own life. I know women who didn't know what was in their joint accounts. I know women who had no income of their own, no credit history in their own name, nothing to stand on when their marriage ended. I was lucky, and I also had worked to be lucky. And those two things are both true. The week my settlement finalized, I went for dinner with Marta in Leslieville. We ordered too much food and split a bottle of wine, and she asked me how I felt. Like I got my life back, I said, which is strange because I didn't realize I bossed it. She nodded like she knew exactly what I meant. I've been in my East York apartment for 7 months now. I have a window in the bedroom that faces east, and in the spring, the light comes in at a slant and sits on the hardwood floor in a long, warm strip, and I have started looking forward to that. To small things being mine, to waking up and knowing exactly what is in every account, every drawer, every corner of the life I am building. Last month, I enrolled in a financial planning course through the Registered Nurses Association. Not because I don't trust myself, but because I want to be better at this. I want the next version of my life to be built on ground I understand completely. My colleague, Amanda, the one who did long distance while her partner finished his residency, she asked me recently if I had any regrets. I thought about it honestly. I regret that I didn't trust the feeling I had on the day he first told me about Vancouver, the small cold thing in my chest. I've learned to listen to that now. I don't regret any of the steps I took after. If you're reading this and you're somewhere I've been unsure, quietly tracking something that doesn't add up, trying to figure out if what you're feeling is real, I want you to know one thing. Document everything. Find a good lawyer. And whatever you do, don't close that account that's only in your name. That account is not a lack of trust. That account is the floor you stand on when everything else starts to shift. I know because it was mine, and it held. There's a version of this story where I fall apart, where I spend 18 months waiting by the phone, slowly realizing something is wrong, and by the time I know enough to act, there's nothing left to protect. I've met women who live that version. I almost lived it myself. What stopped me wasn't some extraordinary instinct. It was smaller than that. It was years of quiet habits, keeping my own account, tracking our budget every month, reading the statements instead of just paying them. Those things felt mundane when I was doing them. They felt like the difference between staying and drowning when everything came apart. I think about cause and effect a lot now, not in any mystical sense, just the plain, practical kind. Nathan made choices that had consequences. The Whistler Hotel, the Gastown Jewelry, the Wednesday night dinner for two in Kitsilano, each one a decision that compounded into an outcome. And the choices I made quietly over years, documenting, saving, knowing, those compounded too. In the opposite direction. What I've come to believe is that integrity isn't just about being a good person in obvious moments. It's about the small decisions nobody watches you make. Nathan made his small decisions in the dark and thought they didn't count. I made mine in the dark too. Every month at that kitchen table, every paycheck I tracked, every statement I actually read. And those ones held up in a lawyer's office in Yorkville. I'm not saying I was perfect. I stayed in a marriage longer than I should have because I wanted to believe the discomfort I felt was just adjustment, just distance, just a hard season we'd get through together. That cost me time I won't get back. But I'd rather acknowledge that honestly than pretend I handled everything flawlessly, because the honest version is more useful to someone reading this than the polished one. What carried me through, what I think actually carries any of us through something like this, is a combination of things that sound simple until you need them. It's knowing what's right and doing it even when the easier thing would be to look away. It's being clear-headed enough to gather information before you react, to consult someone who knows more than you do, to make decisions based on facts rather than fear. And it's the willingness to keep going when the path forward is uncomfortable and unfamiliar, and you're doing it largely alone. Marta gave me the name of my lawyer. That one conversation changed the outcome of my year. I try to be that person for others now, not with legal referrals necessarily, but with honesty, with saying the real thing instead of the comfortable thing. I live in East York now. I have a savings account in my own name and a window that faces east and a life that is entirely clearly mine. I didn't get here because things went well. I got here because when things went badly, I had built something underneath me that held. That's what I want to leave you with, not the $298,000. The floor. Build the floor before you need it.